Welcome back, guys. Or if you're new to my channel, this is Automotive Anonymous, and that's the Hyundai Palisade. That's the Subaru Ascent, and in today's video, I'm going to compare these two three-row mid-sized crossover SUVs to help you guys decide which one might be the right vehicle for you. They do share a lot of commonalities, like they're both pretty high trim levels. We have a limited Palisade, which is the 5th highest trim level, and we have the Touring Ascent, which is the highest trim level. They both cost roughly $50,000 after all their options, destination delivery, and they both have a lot to offer, but they also have an equal amount of differences that we need to discuss, and I need to show you firsthand. So today we're going to cover the front to the back and everything in between. And if you guys get anything out of this video, please consider liking this video, comment your thoughts and opinions below, subscribe if you haven't already, and if you're interested, check out the link below. Twin Falls Chevy, let me borrow this one. Twin Falls Subaru, let me borrow this one. They both sell below MSRP. They both ship all over the country, and they're two of the best dealerships in the nation to work with. And with that said, let's get right into this side-by-side comparison review. These are two of the more popular three-row SUVs. Basically, every automaker these days has one, so there is a lot of similarities between them. For instance, they are both top safety picks, so you really don't have to go to a higher trim level to get a lot of the basics you want, like the LED headlights, the blind spot monitoring, the adaptive cruise control, and other features like that. And the Hyundai, which is basically the same platform, this Palisade, as the Kia Telluride, it's from South Korea, where it's both designed and assembled, and then it's shipped to the United States. These sell about 80,000 units every single year in the US. This model came out back in 2020, so it's been out for a little while. This is still the first generation of it. And then the Subaru Ascent, that is a Japanese company, but these are built in America, and they only sell about 60,000 units every single year. It's been out for a few years longer than the Palisade, but it hasn't gained more popularity than a pretty consistent 60,000 units. But I would say it seems like both populations of people who buy these over maybe a better selling three-row SUV like a Ford Explorer, these seem to have a very loyal cult-like following of their owners. So a lot of people love them. A lot of people seem to think they are very safe and reliable. And based off of what we know about the first generation so far, they certainly are. There are a few differences between them, so let's pop the hoods and I'll show you that next. Under the hood, these both have entirely different powertrains, and there's a few notable things before I really get into the powertrains. First of all, they're about equally quick. At my altitude, around 4,000 feet above sea level, where vehicles are starving for oxygen, they both can do a sub 8 seconds 0 to 60, a little bit slower than they're rated, but today's testing, this did a sub 8, and Ascents usually do a sub 8, like a 7.7 to about 8.2, depending on how drastically higher density altitude is. Traction off, it's still a bit of a brake rev, and let's go. Also, something that the Hyundai does well is they still offer a 5-year bumper-to-bumper 60,000-mile warranty or a 10-year 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. So that is the class-leading warranty, whereas the Subaru just has the basic 5-year 60,000-mile powertrain and 3-year 36,000-mile bumper-to-bumper. So let's come over to the Hyundai first. This is a 3.8-liter naturally aspirated V6. It is basically a front-wheel drive setup because the base model Palisades are only front-wheel drive, unfortunately. This one being a higher trim level, it is all-wheel drive, and you can engage that and disengage that on the fly with the button, which I do think is pretty cool. So it is transversely mounted. You can see the engine bracket right there. Just like the Subaru though, you have all of your fluid and filters on the periphery. Everything's easy to find and get to. The fuse boxes, the air filter, the battery, another fuse box. So there actually is quite a bit of room to work under here, but it makes 291 horsepower at 6,000 RPM and 262 pound-feet of torque at 5,200 RPM. So this makes more horsepower than the Ascent, but less torque, and you have to rev it out way higher to get that. But ultimately, the 0 to 60s are basically identical, and because of the final drive gearing and the first gear gearing and the 8-speed transmission, this actually puts the power down basically just as well as this 2.4-liter direct injection turbo, 260 horse at 5,600 RPM, and 277 pound-feet of torque, which comes on at 2,000 RPM. So more torque than that and lower in the RPM band means it's a pretty punchy engine. I actually own this engine in my Outback Wilderness, and after 3 years and 40-something thousand miles, I still love it. Subaru maintenance is super easy. You have the air filter, you have all of your filters and fluids. You actually have a top-mount oil filter on this, unlike you do on that. You have the battery, the fuse boxes, and everything's easy to work on, pretty identifiable. And just like the Hyundai, which I accidentally keep wanting to call that a Kia, so sometimes when I hesitate, that's why I'm self-correcting on the fly. there's a lot of room to work under each of these, but this has the serpentine belt on the front, so it might be a little bit more rear-wheel drive bias, and I would personally much rather have this all-wheel drive system than the front-wheel drive based system in this. Even though this is an H-track, even though this is pretty good, it is a little bit different than the Subaru symmetrical system. Many of the exterior parameters of these are ultimately objectively the same, even though all of the 3-row crossovers look completely different. So these are both 16.5 feet long, about 6 feet wide, and about 5 3/4 foot tall. They both weigh around 4,500 pounds. If you do have a 2-wheel drive Palisade, it is a few hundred pounds less not having the transfer case basically. They can both tow about 5,000 pounds. The Palisade has about 8 inches of ground clearance. The Subaru has 8.7, so it's definitely gonna win in the off-road department, although the Palisade does feel better on-road. It just feels really sporty. And again, with the gearing, the V6 actually feels really lively and sounds pretty good because the Boxer 2.4 and the Ascent doesn't make a ton of noise. So ultimately, a lot of the parameters are very similar. These fit in parking spots about the same. They both have wide opening doors, and they're both gonna be really good options for most people and their family, hence why they sell relatively quite well. There is something to mention though. The Subaru Ascent has a half-gallon larger gas tank. It's a 19.3, the Palisade is an 18.2. The Palisade has the gas tank right there on the driver's side, whereas the Ascent has it on the passenger side. Personally, I prefer to be on the driver's side. And then where these both have about a 20-inch wheel, about a 245, 45, 50 with temporary spare tires. You don't have a ton of sidewall, but honestly, driving on city streets that are paved well, you really don't notice much. I do think if you were off-roading them, you might notice versus having like a 17 or an 18-inch wheel, but ultimately, I can't usually tell the difference between the wheels when I'm on a paved road and you're not pushing the vehicles to their limits and what their suspension can accommodate for. So you do have a half-gallon bigger gas tank here. That's very negligible. And then these both get around 19 city, around 24 to 26 highway, depending on how they're spec'd. So ultimately, the gas mileage is about the same, about 450 miles per tank. I'm gonna push and hold the power liftgate buttons at the same time, and we'll see which one opens first. Here we go. I don't know why the Palisade didn't register. There we go. Anyways, they both are probably pretty similar. They're both pretty quiet. This one seems to have powered struts on both sides, whereas the Ascent, does it have both? Nope, it just has one. Anyways, back here, the cargo capacity on these is basically also identical to all the other crossovers because behind the third row, you have about 18 cubic feet of room. If you drop this third row, you have about 46. If you drop the second row, you actually have about 85, which is identical to the Subaru. But keep in mind the actual body shape, the height, the depth, the things might be slightly different, although exterior dimensions are the same. So ultimately, it's gonna be pretty close. These are also pretty cool in that you can drop the second row with these power buttons. You can't lift them back up, but you can drop and move the third row and they can lift back up, which I do find pretty cool. You also have a little bit of storage on the Palisade down here with your tire changing tools, and then a temporary spare tire that is hidden underneath the body of the Hyundai right there. And if we come over to the Subaru, you'll notice the third row I already have down. So this is roughly what 46 cubic feet of room looks like. Again, you drop the second row, you have about 85. So you have all the cup holders, the grab ropes, because this one does not have the power options to lower. You have a lighting option, you have a plug-in, and then you have some storage down here with the privacy shade. And then you also have your temporary tire hidden right under there. So it's also a spare. It's not a full-size spare though. Otherwise, this actually has lock and lower or just lower, and the Palisade can only be lowered. Next, we're gonna go through the interior and then we'll wrap this video up. And you'll notice that the interior looks totally different. Remember, this is the highest trim level. It has the brown interior and the wood trim, which I really like. Power options, Harman Kardon speakers, bottle and snack holder. You have bolstering, you have ventilated heated seats, you have a heated steering wheel, you have a huge panoramic roof up top with a powered sunshade. You have all-weather mats, you have rubberized pedals, you have a fuse box, knee airbag, hood release. Only a few extra options noted right there. You have a little bit of storage, trip reset, lighting stock, tilting and telescoping, leather heated wrapped wheel. And when we sit inside here, if we fire it up, the needles dance. This has steering responsive headlights, which are really cool. I also have some nighttime driving videos of my own Subarus if you want to see how these do at night. Paddle shifters for the 8 simulated gears of the CVT. You can go through info and see what it has to offer. Otherwise, voice and volume on the left, adaptive cruise settings on the right with the heated wheel option. The horn, it's loud, it's high pitched. This is your screen. It's not my favorite, but you do have wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, which is ultimately what you're going to be using probably. You have some storage, some more wood trim. You have a 360-degree camera, just like on the Palisade, but the Palisade does do it better. You have some cup holders, electronic parking brake, your actual gear shifter, and then you have some storage with a lifty tray in there. Otherwise, up here you can move the sunshade with this one. You can open the window with this one. You'll see it is a split design, which is pretty common on a lot of these. You have a mirror to spy on those in the back seat. You also have a spot for your sunglasses, auto dimming mirrors, and a power rear view mirror if that's what you're into. Anyways, let's turn it off and we'll hop into the Hyundai. This is going to be kind of a silly thing, but I don't like the door handles or the trim piece on the mirrors of either of these. I do think the Subaru looks better, looks higher end, but I just don't necessarily like it either way. You do have proximity key features on both vehicles, but I just feel like they could have spent a few more dollars on that for it to not look as cheap. Otherwise, nice black materials. Not going to be as nice as the interior of the Touring, at least the color scheme of it. But you also have memory seats, you also have upgraded speakers, you have snack and bottle holder, Palisade on the door sill. The non-all-weather mats, but they are carpeted mats, rubberized pedals, hood release, OBD2, fuse box. Here are the options you have on this one. They both can tow 5,000 pounds, so this has a tow setting you can get into right there. Lighting stock, heated telescoping steering wheel, and then you have ventilated heated power seats. No thigh bolstering extension, but they still look really nice, and you have similar amounts of glass up top, but it's done quite a bit differently. And then sitting inside here, even though it is very dark and black materials, it's actually kind of cool. Heated leather wrapped wheel with 8 speeds for the actual 8-speed transmission. The paddle shifters, you can fire it right up. Really good technology in this one. A lot of software engineering went into this. It still has some information from the old owner, so we're gonna try to avoid showing you any of that on the screen. Anyways, you can go through your displays with this button right here. You have voice and volume controls and adaptive cruise on the steering wheel. Also, when you go through your different modes, the gauges, they change. Pretty cool, pretty fun stuff. And overall, it's just a really nice place to be. It feels very futuristic in here. You don't have shift by wire, but you do have these cool little buttons. You have physical climate controls, which I prefer. You can control all-wheel drive, either have it in front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive right there, auto vehicle hold. These are all of your climate controls for the seat and the steering wheel. And then you have this really interesting storage cubby that has a wireless charger, just like the Subaru has, some plugins, some cup holders, and then you have a lifty tray and 2 12 volts in this pretty big center console. This does not have a rear digital camera like the other one did on this trim level. You'd have garage door openers. You don't have a sunglass storage, but you do have a mirror to spy on the back seat people. And you have basically the same type of controls up here, LED lighting, and then you can control the shade right there for that second one and manually controlled on the first one. Otherwise, it's not too bad of a place to be. It's actually very comfortable. I really like these seats. My backpack and I have had a lot of fun driving this around for the full review of it. So with that said, let me hop into the back of the Ascent and I'll show you what's going on back there. Both of these vehicles actually have a really nice second row, and it's pretty fun to ride back here. First of all, the door panel, you still have some of the brown materials, the wood trim. Cup holders in the doors is pretty common on this class of vehicle. You have the extra sunshade beyond the factory, probably 20% tint, and that's about what you get. Harman Kardon speaker down there. And then this is the brown leather seat. It should also be heated. There's a few different ways to get into the back, which I'll show you in just a second. But when I sit behind my driver position, it's easy to find a comfortable spot. I have a bar to adjust as close or far away as I want. I guess that's as far as I can go. And then with the handle, I can recline and get pretty far back. Otherwise, ventilation, plug-ins, some cup holders down here. So you can get to the back through the transmission tunnel if you can narrowly avoid these fold-down armrests. Also, you have LED lighting, ventilation, and a handle. And when this moonroof is open, there's a lot of natural light that comes in. So you can crawl through the middle, or you can drop the seats. If you're in the back, push this one. If you're in the front, you can push this one. It's pretty easy to drop and slide. Remember, the back seats were folded down from earlier. You do have a couple steps to get up to the roof rails, which are standard on both of these vehicles. And if I pop up the seat, it's actually fairly light. I was expecting it to be a little bit heavier, but Subaru seats usually aren't too too heavy. You can also see the shape of the headrests. Kind of interesting, but they fold in nicely, so they're not going to take up a lot of your visibility, which is already kind of limited back there. But if I climb back here and I sit behind myself, if the seat is all the way back, my knees are going very far forward and I'm having a horrendous time. Otherwise, cup holders, storage, speaker, vent, lighting. So there's a few nice, features back here, but you're gonna want to have the person be slid pretty far forward. And remember, when I was in this seat, there wasn't a ton of room forward. So either way, it's not the most pleasant thing to do. And with that said, let's figure out this handle and get out of here. You also have child safety tethers, which I like too. Now, the back of the Palisade, I would say, is an equally nice experience. You have nice door pockets that are very much the same as the front. You actually have 2 cup holders. You also have the sunshade right here. And then the seats, let's see how heavy these are to lift. It's actually getting stuck with the driver's seat positioned how it was. The weight of it is probably pretty similar to the Subaru. You again have basically the same ways to get in and out, but these are electronic, at least to lower, but not to lift, if you guys remember from the back. So sitting in here with the same bar to grab, to slide, I can push my knees into the chair, it hurts. I can slide back, and I actually don't have as much room back here, it feels like. This seat could maybe be moved forward a little bit, but still, it's very similar amounts of room. Still have a tunnel for the all-wheel drive system. You have about the same features. You also have ventilated seats back here, and you have some plugins. So you could climb to the 3rd row through here. You also have a lot of light, but most of this is behind me and gonna be more beneficial to the 3rd row than the 2nd row, unlike the Subaru that had light, or it had like a window for this whole thing. So if I do hop out, and I use the fancy button to drop the seat, check that out. That's pretty cool. So back here, you have about the same amount of room. These seats can really recline pretty far. Remember, right now it's very far forward, and I barely have enough room right there, even with it all the way forward and the seat reclined a little bit. So not the funnest thing. You do have about the same commodities back here and vent up here. I don't see lighting. I guess that's the lighting, but you don't have your own control panel for it. So overall, you're not going to want to be in the back seat of a 3rd row SUV if you're a full-size adult. Ultimately, I do think these are both pretty fun vehicles to drive. I've spent a lot more time personally driving and reviewing the Ascents than I have the modern Hyundais and Kias, but I do think that this is a really good product. On street, if you're not going to go off-road and you don't necessarily need the best all-wheel drive system in the business, I think the Palisade might be the right vehicle for you. If you are going to go off-road, you need the extra inch of ground clearance and you need a slightly better, more mechanical all-wheel drive system, maybe go the Subaru route. But I don't think you guys can go wrong either way. They're both top safety picks. They both have a lot of the same commodities. If you can afford to spend about 50 grand for a fully loaded trim level, go for it. If you do want more of a base model, spend, in the upper 30s. For 2025, there aren't really many changes for either of these models. The base Ascent is supposed to be gone, so now you're starting at the premium, and it's going to be priced very similarly to the $37,000 basic level Palisade. So the competition is pretty competitive between these two vehicles, and there's a lot of reasons to love them both. But ultimately, what matters is what you think. So are you guys gonna buy one of these? Do you already own one? What are your thoughts and opinions, and what was your ownership experience like thus far if you already have one? I'd love to know in the comments, so let me know down there. Like this video if you get anything out of it. Comment your thoughts and opinions below. And remember, check out the Twin Falls Chevy, the Twin Falls Subaru. They can ship it to you. You could go for a road trip, but if you want a good deal below MSRP and you want to deal with a good dealership, you know where to find them in the link down below. Anyways, guys, I wish you the best. I hope you get to test drive these and at least a half dozen other crossovers to make sure that you find the right vehicle for you. And with that said, I wish you guys the best. Hope you take care and hope to see you again on the next one. See ya.